Thank you, everyone, for coming. Today, I'm looking at citizen journalism for social mobilization in war-affected Tigray. As you all know, citizen journalism is something that is normally associated with online and technology-related issues. But today, we're going to look how citizen journalism has been practiced from the offline context. Because of the war, that everything has been shut down and no internet connection in Tigray, because as you can see, there has been massive war, genocide that happened to the people, and eventually people have managed to smuggle the stories and the videos, which I don't know whether it is the right word to use, but they managed to tell the world what has happened, because Tigray has been under a complete siege during that time. So it's a study undertaken by myself and my colleague called Gebru, and then we tried to make a study on how these people managed to reach the world, so that everything will be known about the war on Tigray and the sufferings people had experienced. So as to the contents of the presentation, first, we will look at the Ethiopian context, that is the equivalent of Ethiopian in the German context, because you don't find it in your case. I've tried to bring Ethiopian as from the German perspective. So just to look at the political and the social context of what Ethiopia looks like, how the current leadership come to the power, and what has happened since then. And then I'll look at what happened to the war on Tigray and how it came out. And then we will look at the citizen journalism. By the way, citizen journalism is actually, it's not a new concept to the Western world, but it has been very much a new one for the African context, because of repressive regimes that they don't let people to practice it because of the freedom of expression, very limited freedom of expression in the country, almost across African countries. And then I will look at why citizen journalism is really important in the context of information blackout and in the offline context, unlike other Western world where internet is it's available for everyone and freedom of expression is for everyone. So then I will look at the citizen witnessing in war journalism, that is an emerging practice since the Arab Spring, within and after the Arab Spring, how it emerged and how it is really becoming useful in the context of war-related environments where people don't have a means to, or mainstream media houses don't cover the story of the oppressed or the story of the voiceless. Rather, it is these citizen journalists who have the chance to reflect what has really happened on that. And then I'll take a look at on the methods and materials we used to come, and then later I will talk about the findings that we got as far as citizen journalism and social mobilization in war-affected Tigray. So as far as the political context is concerned, the political and social context of Ethiopia is concerned, that it is the country located in East Africa, as you can see, bordered by Somalia, Djibouti, and Sudan, and Eritrea. And then it is one of the second most populated nation in Africa. The country has around 86 ethnic groups of different language, different culture, and different religious views. And the country follows a federal governance system, 9 regions, 2 administrative towns. And the APRDF has ruled the country for the last 27 years, like the Ethiopian People's Republic Democratic Front, that is a coalition of 4 parties, the TPLF from Tigray, the ADP Amhara Democratic Front from the Amhara regional state, then the OPDO, the Oromo People's Democratic Organization from the Oromia region, and the South Eastern People Democratic Movement from southern Ethiopia. These are the 4 major parties who established this coalition government and ruled the country for 27 years. And then there are other minor parties coming across the different regions to rule the country. So one of the longest duration, because I'm starting from 1991, but before that there was a leadership from the Derg regime, and then before that there was a Haile Selassie regime. You may remember that, the king Haile Selassie. So because of continued uprising in the country, then by the end of 2018, APRDF became dissolved. People's uprising, internal failures to the regime who has ruled the country, they couldn't continue with the leadership because of different reasons. Then there was a continued uprising in the country, then ended up dissolving this one in 2018, and a new leadership emerged. So a new leadership emerged. It's not a new leadership. Actually, it's a leadership change. A leadership change from the APRDF party itself, from the OPDO I mentioned earlier, from the Oromo People's Democratic Organization, that a leadership came, and that leadership was a peaceful transition from the APRDF, who has ruled for the 27 years, and then to a new leadership which will be led by Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister that is currently ruling the country. He came up with a number of promises. The West liked him very much, and they gave him a Nobel Prize for making peace with Eritrea, which was actually not known. The details of the peace deal were not quite clear with the people of Ethiopia, and neither does with the people of Eritrea. Anyways, the West were quite surprised. He's a young leader, he's promising, the transition was fine, and they were happy, and then they ended up giving him a Nobel Prize in October 2019 for a Nobel Peace Prize for making a peace with Eritrea. That was a beginning of a hope for Ethiopia and a hope for Africa, and the world had started to hope that better will come for the nation. And later, despite the fact that he came up with promise, later insecurity and ethnic clashes continued in the country, and a chief engineer of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was assassinated in the capital Addis Ababa, and the country's chief of staff, who is originally from Tigray, has been assassinated in Addis Ababa as well, and high-profile government officials in the Amhara regional state were killed, and a number of violences have happened, despite the fact that this man has been awarded the Nobel Prize Peace for making a deal with Eritrea. So the country has come to chaos, and insecurity has lasted in the nation, taking the lives of many people, many innocent civilians, as well as high government level officials. So Abiy, despite the fact that he came out with promise to stabilize the country and make a peace, he failed to tackle these challenges. He was unable to deal with why the country has came to chaos, which doesn't exist beforehand in the last 27 years in the previous government. But what he did was he tried to externalize the problem to TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and to OLA, Oromo Liberation Army, that he's imagining that these two parties are orchestrating the conflict and the insecurity in the country, and he said that you are the ones responsible for the chaos that is happening in the nation. But the TPLF came to reiterate that the country should respect the constitution and a peaceful coexistence of its people across different regions. But even though they say that, Abiy Ahmed continued to target TPLF and the people of Tigray in Addis Ababa and different parts of the nation, assuming that you are the ones who are doing this, not other people, other people in the nation. So he tried to discriminate Tigray from federal institutions, and then he made several accounts of ethnic profiling from different organizations for the people of Tigray who work in different organizations, like the Ethiopian Airlines, the bank, and other institutions. And then he blocked roads that connect Tigray with its neighboring regions, like the Amhara region, the Afar region, and then to the capital Addis Ababa. And then discrimination have happened in budget allocations and releasing it. Further details, like 2 years budget has not been released till now, till the moment I speak. So these things continue to happen as a pretext to come to war or to lead a war in one of its regional administrations, that is the Tigray regional state. Then a widespread anti-Tigray sentiment has happened, both home and in the diaspora. Then that's followed by extreme levels of hate speech, like let's devour the highness and repent. All of these cases actually go to the people of Tigray, like let's devour the highness and repent, like they are the Satanists from the religious perspective, and the enemies of Ethiopia, and the weed and the cancerous of Ethiopia, and the military junta that refers to the military who comes to power without any election. So these were some of the hate speeches and extreme views about the people of Tigray before declaring actually the war. So after that, the Ethiopian media were quite attached to the government and tried to spread the hate as per that it comes from the government, and regularly disseminated these hate speeches. And all of a sudden, the nation started to hate the people, assuming that the people of Tigray are all evils to dismantle the country. And then ethnic polarization has emerged, the concept of we and they. They are the ones, we are the ones, so we don't have any social fabric that connects us together. So they are they and we are we. There is no anything that connects us. So this dichotomy has eventually developed. A sense of belongingness, a sense of standing together as a people couldn't last long. And then Abiy has started to jam and shut down media houses who have different views than those approaches, like the OMN, the Oromo Media Network, and the LTV, who are owned by diaspora. They were jammed several times and then eventually shut down. They couldn't broadcast from Ethiopia. And the DW TV, that is based in Tigray, and Tigray TV, which is still based in Tigray, were jammed several times and finally ended up being shut down. And the TMH, Tigray Media House, which is US-based diaspora TV, has been jammed several times and eventually shut down because of the views that are covered there. And after this, because Ethiopia is as I have mentioned earlier, Ethiopia is a federal state that takes election every 5 years. So the 2020, after he took the Nobel Prize Peace for making peace, then he has to come to election and democratic process. And that was the beginning of his democratization for the country. He has to take a national election in 2020, but he tried to escape from that election in the name of COVID-19, but he postponed the national election because of the reasons that he said COVID-19 will not let us to undertake the election, despite the fact that other African countries have taken it. But the Tigray regional state, because of as one member of the national, as one member of the regional states in the federal system of Ethiopia, exercised its constitutional rights of electing its new leaders, and myself included, everyone participated in the election because we have to elect our members. And then Abiy Ahmed claimed that this election is void and illegal because we exercised our constitutional rights. He said what you did is quite void and illegal, and then declared the war of the worlds. He declared the war as a pretext that we took election. So the war was declared in November 4, 2020, and before that, despite the fact that Abiy had made a peace deal with Eritrea, he signed a memorandum of understanding in the United Arab Emirates, which no one still today know that he made an agreement with Isaias Afwerki that we don't know what it is, and no one, neither does his ministers do know, that he signed an agreement just to declare war on the people of Tigray. So he had preparations in advance with Ethiopian National Defense, with regional militia, special forces from Amhara and Fano, still from Amhara regional state. He has combined both internal and external forces, like forces from Eritrea, forces from Somalia, and sophisticated drones from the United Arab Emirates, the same from Turkey, the same long-wing drones from China, and other machineries from Russia as well. So these are the external support he was getting. We practically know, because I was in Tigray from the start till the end of the war, I know what was really happening, and the global community knows that these people, these countries have directly or indirectly involved in the war. So not only that, there were other invisible hands who were supporting him through intelligence and finance, because the point is that they accepted him as a one who came to bring peace with Eritrea. They assumed that he's a peaceful man. He brings peace to the Horn of Africa. Then let's kill this few number of people, 7 million people, and then that's fine as far as Ethiopia gets stabilized. So a whole number of crimes being committed on the people, with the issue that they elected their leader, with the view that they said the constitutional order must be restored, nothing else. So this has happened. Now it was declared, different people have different narratives about the war, because different actors, as I have mentioned to you, and different objectives. So Abiy Ahmed declared that it is a law enforcement operation targeting a few TPLF officials in the country, targeting a few TPLF leaders in Tigray. So he called it is a law enforcement operation and an internal matter. Then the Amhara region, who are neighbors to Tigray, stated that it is a state restitution operation. Assume that we will kill Tigrayans and then we will take the fertile land in some parts of the region. So they assume that it is a state restitution. And we as the people of Tigray said it is a genocide, because there is no point, had it been a law enforcement operation, there is no point to invite foreign mercenaries to kill your own people. So a law enforcement, you send police officers, take those illegal people that are assumed or did something wrong, and then the rest of the Tigray people would have been safe. But that was not the case. The case was to stabilize, to invite both internal and external forces and declare war, which is practically a genocide. I will come to that, why it is a genocide. I will come to the details why we call it genocide in terms of the crimes being committed, in terms of the magnitude of the war, in terms of the atrocities being committed. So what were the strategies aligned with related to this war? Different narratives and different strategies. So Abiy, as a leader, has used a number of strategies, like 4 strategies, as a weapon, besides to using sophisticated drones. By the way, utilizing drones is the first of its kind in the African continent, except in Tigray. No one has used so far a drone. So he's the first leader to use drones to attack his own people. So he used hunger as a weapon of war. He used rape as a weapon of war as well. A number of girls and women raped. He used siege as a weapon of war, and he used information blackout as a weapon of war. Here is why then the citizen journalists will come. So I will explain each of them, what it means and what they hold. So let's look at each of them. So hunger as a weapon of war means people denied access to food. They didn't get the chance to food. These kids, as you can see, were looking for bread in nearby environment because they don't have anything to eat. So 4 News, which is UK-based media, has reported that Ethiopia has used hunger as a weapon of war. Then Mustafa Bag from Euronews has wrote to the international community that the nation is using hunger as a weapon of war by blocking access to the world, by blocking access to humanitarian service that the country deserves, the people deserve to have. So he used this as a means so that the people of Tigray will not live long. For those who escape from the military operation will not have the chance for survival. So this is one of the strategies he applied. Through using hunger as a weapon of war, he came up to deny basic services, like we don't have, for the last 2 years, we didn't get the chance to access our bank account because all freezed. We didn't have access to health care services. Hospitals were not anymore operating, either looted by the Eritrean soldiers or demolished. We didn't have access to electricity. As a university professor, I have to go to the forest to collect food so that my wife can cook food for us. The same has happened to my colleagues as well. And we didn't have a salary for 2 years, and neither do we get any source of income. And humanitarian blockade has happened, especially the Eritrean and Amhara forces blocked access to any humanitarian service that comes to the Tigray region. So these were the practices he has practically used as hunger as a weapon of war. Then the next strategy he applied was he used rape as a weapon of war. Several number of women by the Eritrean and military Amhara forces specifically. This is one of the victims that has been broadcasted in several international media, and the DW from this area has reported that rape has been used as a weapon of war. The people you see in here carrying a weapon is an Ethiopian flag, so it's an easy indication that it is from Ethiopia. Similarly, Al Jazeera from the stream has reported that rape has been used as a weapon of war. So serious crime being used about that. So it's not simply rape, it is gang rape. Eritrean forces in mass raped women and girls. The same happened by Amhara forces, the same happened to paramilitary Fano group, a vigilante group, and the same happened to the Ethiopian National Defense Forces. So rape came like from 7 years old girl to 86-year-old woman. Anyone was a victim of that. Then another horrific aspect of this was that a family member is forcefully ordered to rape his sister or his niece or any one of his family members. The intention was to cleanse the bloodline of the people of Tigray. Either you Amharanize them or you Eritreanize them. That means the bloodline should be either an Eritrean or as an Amhara, and then the people of Tigray should be abolished from the surface of the earth. That was a serious crime against the people of Tigray. That is one of the clues that makes it genocide. Then it ended up raping, 120,000 women and girls raped. But I strongly believe that this is underrepresented or underreported, because in Ethiopia people are much more attached to their culture, to their religion, and a sense of taboo that saying that I'm raped will result in taboo. So very much underreported cases. But these are the cases that the world has came across to know that this number of females and girls and women have been raped. So 120,000, a gang rape and ordering rape by a family member. Serious number of crimes being committed. And then the other one was the siege as a weapon of war. That declared the siege. No one from the Tigray has access to freedom of movement. You have to stay where you are. If you are in Tigray, you have to stay there. If you are in other parts of Ethiopia, you have to go to detention centers, concentration centers, practically. And then no flights, both flights and road transport to and from Tigray. And also border areas tightly controlled by military groups so that people cannot have the chance to go out of where they are. So you have to stay where you are. You have to reside where you are. Unless you stay in Tigray, the end point will be you gonna be heading to detention centers, concentration centers. So what crime is being committed within those three stuff that it's widely reported by international organizations, by Amnesty International and human rights organizations, that crimes against humanity have happened, war crimes have practically been happened, and extrajudicial killings and denial of burial services have happened, like 1 million being killed. That's a figure widely reported in international context. Denial of burial services is then they kill a person and then they don't allow you to bury that person. Especially the Eritrean forces kill our colleagues, and then we are not allowed to bury them. Rather, they remain around there so that a wild animal can take their remains. So serious number of crimes, horrific number of issues have happened. Then crimes of aggression against the territorial integrity of Tigray, and forced displacement of citizens, that is related to ethnic cleansing from western Tigray, which is very much fertile part of the Tigray, and southern Tigray and eastern Tigray, Eastern Tigray, it is very much border to Eritrea. Southern Tigray is border to Amhara, and Western Tigray is still border to Amhara. So it's very much fertile land, and then they have to displace forcefully people so that they can flee to Sudan or other areas. And then it is ethnic cleansing, as the United States and other nations have already mentioned. So it's ethnic cleansing. All of this epitomize genocide. That's what we are as a people claim, because we faced what has happened there. So it's a war that took 1 million people. So the fourth fact, that strategy that Abiy used was the information blackout. There was no access to the internet for solid 2 years. There was no access to telephone. There was no access to regional media because of jamming and shutdown. You only listen to the Ethiopian media that states that Abiy Ahmed is undertaking a law enforcement operation in Ethiopia, in Ethiopia's Tigray region. So everything has been shut down. We don't have anything to listen. So Tigray is completely cut off from the rest of the world. No one knows what is really happening in there. No one have the access to reflect, this is happening to me. So he encircled us and put us into siege and declared deliberate information blackout, and then we are cut off. We are disconnected from the rest of the world. So not only that, then Abiy has also blocked access to international media. What international media used to report is just the case of law enforcement operation, because most of them were used to rely on the government sources, or what we call official sources, to cover their reporting. So they focused on like international media like Al Jazeera and CNN at earlier levels, and including France 24. At earlier levels of the war, they said that Abiy Ahmed is undertaking a law enforcement operation. So it was simply a one-sided reporting indicating that a law enforcement operation been happening in Tigray, not the killings, not the rape, and not the other crimes. So these things remained unreported. No one knew what really is happening in Tigray. No one really realized, is Tigray suffering that sorts of crimes? No one, even our friends and family members who live abroad, did know what is really happening. So that was because we were encircled, because everything has cut off from the rest of the world. So that's one of the techniques he used. So in this context, citizens have come across with the concept of using mobile phones to record what has happened, to record their daily accounts of what have been happening. Abiy Ahmed and his allies didn't kill people, but they demolished infrastructure, they looted schools, they burned factories. Especially the Eritrean and Amhara forces took every belonging from Tigray to their respective areas. So they have to keep pictures, they have to keep videos of these crimes. They have to document what has happened in their environment. These are ordinary citizens who don't have the training in journalism and communication or whatever, but they are ordinary citizens who have to record their daily accounts on mobile phones, share these accounts to their fellow members, and send some of the videos to international media abroad. The TMH I mentioned to you and the other international media houses. So eventually things came to be known by the world. So here comes the concept of citizen witnessing that I mentioned in the introduction, that citizens are witnessing what Abiy Ahmed wants to hide. They try to witness to the world that something is happening that the world didn't know in Tigray. So it's called citizen witnessing during war journalism. Citizens witnessing that something is happening in Tigray, but the rest of the world doesn't know. So it is a concept that is given from Alan and Chaulia Raki in 2013, 2015, and it's a concept that emerged mainly after the Arab Spring. Within the Arab Spring and after the Arab Spring, how citizens witness what has happened to them and what is happening around their environments when the mainstream media doesn't give coverage. So that is a concept that emerged after this era and then in most African countries. Other Western world citizens don't report this because it's not happening anymore there. They may report corruption, they might report, if any, or they might report other issues that is happening to the community, if any. But in the context of the Arab, as you all know, and in the context of African cases, they have to report these issues because mainstream media, government media, do not have the access to do so or do not have the permission to do so because of the limited rights to expression or freedom to expression. So this concept of citizen journalism initially came to appear. So this takes us to the concept of citizen journalism. So as you all know, this is a term that is known by different names. Some call it like public journalism, others can call it civic journalism, collaborative journalism, grassroots journalism, community journalism, and goes on. So because of these different definitions, we don't have, different terms, we don't have a concrete definition what it stands for or what it is, but completely settled, there is no completely settled boundaries in terms of its definition. Similarly, it resists any easy definition or unified story, as this scholar has found out. So there is no unified definition being given for what it is. But the central point is that citizens collect and distribute and disseminate stories or whatever they experience in their daily lives, who are not trained journalists but members of the community, but participating in collecting and distributing or disseminating stories or videos that they face. So based on this, for this study, we took the definitions by Bowman and Wills that states the act of a citizen, a group of citizens playing an active role in the process of collecting, reporting, analyzing, and disseminating news and information. That's the simple definition which is associated with citizen journalism, who they are. They are not a trained people that were meant to do the practice, but they are people who suddenly came to the profession because the mainstream media didn't give much coverage or much attention to people's sufferings, to marginalized voices, and the like. So this is a practice that eventually emerged in Tigray because of the sufferings people had experienced. So the issue of citizen journalism, as I have mentioned earlier, is not a wide or a commonly seen practice, but it came to appear since the mid-2000s, especially with the emergence of mobile phones, and most of them came up with political crisis in different parts of Africa, especially in Kenya, post-election case, post-election violence, in Zimbabwe related to Robert Mugabe's activities and the likes, and in Nigeria related with corruption, violence, Boko Haram, and the likes, which you might have come across related with this issue. So the first starting point was political crisis. So in this context, citizens started reporting what has happened in their environment. So it came out with these issues and with the emergence of smartphones. So why citizen journalism is becoming dominant, especially in African context? One of the reasons is that the traditional media has widened the gap between ordinary citizens and the government. Traditional media has forgotten to report what really citizens are facing, rather focusing on the propaganda of the government, on the views of the government, what the government does, the best achievements of the government, the success stories, rather than the failings of the government. So the advent of the smartphones has brought citizens to record and dispatch or send stories to different connections or different links to report to the outside world that something is happening in certain part of the world. So the same has experience in sub-Saharan Africa, including Ethiopia, where there is strict access to freedom of expressions, and citizen journalists are not much more given the chance report and to write stories. So one of the roles of citizen journalism is that it enhances public sphere. It gives civic engagement. Citizens can have the chance to reflect, can have the chance to produce stories, and especially in repressive regimes such as ours. It empowers marginalized communities such as the people of Tigray. Also, it diversifies media coverage of marginalized voices, marginalized communities, which otherwise would have been silenced. So it is essential to look at it, why it is becoming an emerging phenomenon, but it is useful to the community because of this. So other studies also reflect that it has been useful to bring to attention human sufferings in different parts of the world, human rights abuses and violations in different parts of the world. So based on this, we wanted to examine what role citizen journalists had in the information blackout in Tigray. We wanted to know really if these people were really useful in reporting the crimes happened in Tigray, the human rights violations happened in Tigray and the like. So we came up to ask these issues. The first one was, what were the dominantly covered topics and sources used by these citizen journalists, these ordinary people who collect the story and send them to abroad? And how did they collect and distribute these news reports and videos? What were the techniques they used? And what was their role for social mobilization? Because the issue is about mobilizing the public and making the war people's war. That was the very intention of the war, because we are 7 million people fighting against the 100+ million people and external forces. We have to struggle for our survival. So what role they have? And that because of the information blackout I raised earlier, these people don't have access to the internet to send the stories spontaneously. Rather, they have to travel longer distances to send. So how did all this come up? And how did they make the world know these things happened in Tigray? That were the areas myself and my colleague were interested to explore. So we came across to ask these questions. So we used as a mixed methods approach to analyze our study. Like we used individual interviews for citizen journalists and community members who are nearby, like 15 individual interviews, 8 of them with citizen journalists and 7 of them with community members, how the community members understand citizen journalism and what they benefited and how they learned about that. And then we also had focus group discussions with community members consuming the news and the videos. Also, we made a content analysis of 110 videos that were sent from citizen journalists broadcasted somewhere abroad, and we tried to download them and came up to analyze how they are relevant and what areas they focused on. So the quantitative aspect and the qualitative aspect, we have tried to explore these methods. Then as far as the findings related, in terms of the dominantly covered topics and the sources they used, we came to realize that this practice was actually practiced by educated individuals from different fields. Could be natural science, could be social science, could be engineering, whatever they are, but it included individuals from educated background. They know what really it means, they know how to use this, they know how to record, and they know what is really happening rather than any people. So it was dominantly males rather than females, and we realized that it is associated with fear factor and the continuous rape. Females were not to the forefront. It was mainly by males that the reporting was undertaken, and covered different topics like social issues dominantly. 49% of the coverage focuses on social issues. The 43% covers the military issues, the winning and loss within the Abiy force and the Tigrayan forces. The Tigrayan forces called the Tigray Defense Forces, called TDF, how the fighting going on, who is doing what, who is winning in which front. So these were the focal areas of sending reporters. And the other thing is the political issue, which didn't get much coverage, 19% of the total coverage. So these were the issues that they dominantly covered. As far as the sources are concerned, as far as the issues are concerned, they focused mainly on, as I've said earlier, they focused mainly on social issues because of the civilian atrocities, the crimes against humanity, the ethnic cleansing such as in Western Tigray, and the genocide by the Allied forces. These were the focus of the points, because every time they need to get videos of people killed, news stories of girls and women raped, and lootings of a school, lootings of a church, or demolition of infrastructure, factories, schools, hospitals, and the like. So all related to social issues. That's why the coverage was higher than other aspects. So these were the areas we came up to know. These were the areas that they give an emphasis. As far as the sources are concerned, what were the sources? Majority of the sources were the local residents, the people of Tigray, where they reside. They get the stories from them as eyewitnesses. And the other one is the official sources. That is, because since Abiy Ahmed came to the regional administration, since Abiy Ahmed controlled Tigray and came to the capital city, Mekele, the regional TPLF forces fled to the neighboring suburbs, and he has to control the city and established interim government of his own. Then they were considered as official sources, so they have to consult some news from the official sources. That counts 31%. And the other one is from military sources, especially from the Tigray Defense Force perspective, how the war is going on, who is the number of casualties, what is happening, the weakness and the strengths. So these were the areas that they focused. So the majority of the sources were the local residents who were taken as eyewitnesses. So as eyewitnesses, local residents were helpful to attest the events on the spot, what they saw, what they experienced, what happened to their neighbors, what has happened to the community. So in the context of war, related studies also show that eyewitnesses have important roles in documenting what has happened in conflict zones. So it goes, our findings go with other studies that in similar contexts, that eyewitnesses to provide an important insight of what really means that people can say about the war they face, the conflict they face, the violences they face. So how do they collect the videos, and how do they distribute? So the first one was, then the way they collected was they collect from their daily accounts what they face, what their communities face, and what the eyewitnesses say, and also get stories from community members. For instance, if these citizen journalists are based in Mekele, in the capital city, and then stories may come from other regional areas, could be from east, could be from western Tigray, or could be from neighboring areas. So they can get stories from other community members as well, not only from their daily accounts, but eyewitnesses can say something about it, and community members also can say something about it. That's how they gather the stories. The other thing is these citizen journalists not only collected the stories, but they sent videos to media houses abroad, like the TMH, Tigray Media House, which is a diaspora-based, Washington-based Tigrayan media that disseminates stories related to Tigray. So how did they do that? As I have told you in the earlier, that because of the information blackout, a direct texting and direct sending of these videos or news stories was not possible. So these citizen journalists should travel long distance on foot, not by car or whatever. They have to travel longer distance on foot and get access to the internet and send a story, or else use, because Abiy Ahmed controlled the Tigray, then he resumed flights for a limited number of people. Not everyone can travel, but for a limited number of people. So they have to send the story using USB sticks to Addis Ababa, where access to internet is available. Then these smuggled stories or videos from Tigray to Addis Ababa will be sent by some agencies in Addis Ababa to abroad. That is how international media used to get access to the stories. That's how DW, Al Jazeera, CNN were used to report in the earlier stages of the war, where there was limited access to international media to come to Tigray and cover the stories. So they were not only collecting the stories, but they were taking the risk to smuggle the story. I don't know, smuggling might work here, but that's the word that's coming to me. That you take the story with you and walk longer distance, taking the risk, and make it available for the public, or make it available for the international community, so that the world would know that something is happening. Some serious crimes are happening on the people of Tigray. So the smartphone USB relationship that transported the story, that smuggled the story from Tigray to Addis Ababa, and then from Addis Ababa to the rest of the world, so that the international community could be aware of that. So they contributed not only in collecting the stories, but sending to the rest of the world. So if this is the reality, then what was their role in the social mobilization? Because that's a key term that we would like to know whether they have contributed or not. The first thing is they have great role in informing the community members to unite and support each other. As I have told you, the Abiy government has used hunger as a weapon of war. So you have to share what you have to your neighbors. You have to share what you have to people who don't have anything to eat. You have to share if you have more pants, you have to share to the family member or anyone in the community. You have to share food, you have to share clothes, whatever you have. So we have to share each other. That's how it came from the community member. They have to unite us, they inform the community, and they update the community what is happening around, and then we contribute. Everyone contributes. That's for the sake of survival. So that's what they did. So they informed women and girls that the Allied forces have been committed rape everywhere, so they have to be careful of not going out alone. Either they have to stay home, or they have to go out with some family member, or avoid going out in most circumstances. That is how they try to teach the community, to inform the community of what is really happening around. Also, they were useful to discuss war-related issues, enlightening capable individuals, especially the youth, to join the Tigray Defense Forces. Inform the youths what is really happening. Because, as I've told you, everyone is working against the people of Tigray. The people of Tigray have the only one option, that mobilize their youths and fight against these invaders. We have to fight. The Tigray Defense Force includes university professors, university students, medical people of high school students, and also former military personnel. So everyone mobilized. So they had the greatest role to mobilize these people, to teach how the war is progressing, what their rules could be. So it's not by force, but people should join the military for the sake of self-defense. No one is coming to help us. No country is coming to know what is really happening in Tigray. So they mobilized these people, and the so-called Tigray Defense Forces has been established. A force that came nowhere, but it's a force that was established for the sake of maintaining our survival, and includes PhD holders, master's holders, high school students, and the likes. So they were the ones to inform the public, and then they should nullify that the propaganda of the government, that the government is using, Abiy Ahmed was dominantly using the law enforcement operation, but teach the people that instead genocide is happening, so we have to defend ourselves. So they contributed in that regard. The other thing is, it's highlighting about the People's War. It's a war. I remember the issue of Vietnam. Then they declared a People's War, and they were successful enough in defending the United States. The same has happened in the context of Tigray to make it a people's war. Everyone has to contribute in whatever capacity he or she can do. As a result, we had several number of females who were members of the TDF. Females raped, females whom their brother being killed, females whom their mother raped by the military, females who themselves were raped or their sister raped. They have to join the military, willingly join the military. But joining the military by itself was not easy, because as I have told you, everything was blocked. Then these citizen journalists should inform how to go to the forest and join their members, because it was a risky process to even to go and join them, because if they can see you in the middle, there is highly probable that they can assassinate you there. So they guide how to go there, how to join them. So that was the area they contributed. Also mobilized people for public disobedience, because it was a people's war. Then one of the strategies was that we used to defend ourselves was the public disobedience. That includes obstructing roads, blocking roads, so that they don't have access to vehicles, they don't have a faster means to travel around. Also closing public service centers like shops, restaurants. They don't get anything to eat, they don't get the chance to buy cigarettes in the city, so that we block the shops. And the other thing is related much more with Tzome Tigray, that is a religious concept, that a 3-day fasting, that people will not get out of their homes for 3 days and nothing will be open, and they pray for their survival. And then that includes every denomination, be it Muslim, be it Orthodox, Catholics, or Protestant followers. So that was one of the other public disobedience. So they were the ones to organize these types of activities, declare what is going on. So the other thing is, the other strategy was denying access to information for the allied forces. When they ask you where TDF is, you don't tell them. So they teach people not to give any information. And then you don't tell people how they really get food, where they get water, and the like. So this was collective struggle against these invaders, against these allied forces. So they mobilized these factors, so that made people get a good information of what to do and how to do and when to do and where to do. So they were able to mobilize people. The other thing is, because they informed the international community, then the issue about Tigray has become global. Tigray became well known in the Western world. I remember a number of protests held in Germany. I remember a number of protests held in Switzerland, in the United States, regular protests in the United States, holding that the Nobel Prize winner is committing genocide. All the posters that you see. This happened in 2020, 2021, 2022, until the peace deal agreement was signed. So they made the issue become global. Because of the stories they send, the issue became more of a global. The demonstration was dominated by Tigray diaspora, but later everyone joined them. Everyone looks for justice, joined them, and the Tigray issue became a global agenda. So they ones that contributed for social mobilization, both home and abroad. Number of Tigray citizens joined this demonstration wherever they are. They united, joined this demonstration, and sent some money home so that we could have something to eat. So that was one of the mobilizations they did, and they let the world. It's not a law enforcement operation that is happening in Tigray, rather it is genocide. Then after this, the international community came to know it's really beyond the law enforcement operation. So this report has alerted the international community wherever they are. And the issue came to the United Security Council meeting, and there were 15 sessions about the war on Tigray. Number of sessions have failed because of China and Russia as veto powers, declaring that it is law enforcement operation, regardless of the fact that the failures. But this is the highest number of sessions being held in the international community about a certain region, part of a certain country, that some serious crimes have been happened. So 15 sessions being held because of the contributions these citizen journalists have undertaken. The other thing is the United Nations Human Rights Commission has declared a team of independent investigators to undertake an investigation about the crimes happened in Tigray. But still Abiy Ahmed denied access, so they are working from remote, mainly from Kenya and Sudan. So they don't have access to enter to Tigray because of the issue of accountability. He feels that he really knows that he has committed genocide. So he doesn't let the United Nations Human Rights Commission to come to Tigray and report it. Regardless of that, the international community has established this team, and the investigation has been happening, even if it is from remote. So because of this, Tigray has become a global agenda. International leaders have united to resolve the issue of Tigray, the issue of what is really happening, the hunger in Tigray, the information blackout, the siege in Tigray, and the likes. So they came to learn that something should be done, despite the fact that they didn't take any concrete actions against the perpetrators, that they are still continue to commit several mistakes, so very much several crimes, so very much implicitly. So Tigray has become a global agenda, and the world came to know eventually that serious crimes being committed. So finally, because of this influence, there comes the Pretoria Agreement, that is the cessation of hostilities. COH, the cessation of hostility. It's not a peace deal, but it is a cessation of hostility, permanent cessation of hostility. Both the Tigray Defense Force and the Ethiopian government will not fight. There will not be active war, it means. There will not be active war. There will be a chance to make a deal. Eventually, they will make a deal. So this Pretoria Agreement came to effect in November 2022, 6 months from now. Things are slightly getting to normal, but as you can see, schools have opened. Kids are going to schools, but as you can see, unfortunately, they have to learn under the tree. There are schools demolished, everything has been wiped out, and here you can see an amputated child walking to school, other kids sitting under the tree, and the likes. So normalization has been coming, but very much eventual. So the people of Tigray will have a hope, but it takes much. So this is all about what citizen journalists have brought, and thank you very much.
I was quite interested in the materiality of smuggling the content outside, and I was wondering, because you were mentioning that there was still Ethiopian, that some of the information was smuggled on USB sticks through the Ethiopian with the Ethiopian Airlines, and I was just wondering who were like the people who were still able to take these flights from Mekele to Addis Ababa, yeah, so like the connecting part between Addis Ababa and Mekele. I was like interested, like who were these people, how did that work?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, as I have said earlier, that it was not easy to get out of Mekele, especially in the early quarter of the war. But once Abiy Ahmed controlled the Tigray, almost controlled, up until the second phase of the war, he gave permission to resume flights. So some higher government officials, some people working in NGOs, and some people in interim government got the chance to fly to Addis. And some university professors, of course, got to fly. So whatever you do is you give them the stick, the USB stick. You don't tell them what it is. You put in a package and then give them that. Then you put the address of the recipient, and then they take it as a normal business. You don't disclose what it is. And unfortunately, most of them were successful. No one really knew that these USB sticks hold these big stories. So that's the mechanism that the people of Tigray devised for the sake of survival. And no one said, no, I will not take it. So as I have told you, this is a people's war, and if everyone should cooperate. And unfortunately, it was quite fortunate that these one were not checked by the immigration department or anyone else. So they were safe to arrive to the intended recipient. That's how it's smuggled. The issue is, you don't get, as an individual, you don't get access to flights. So you have to contact those people who have the access, like NGO people who have regular freedom of movement because of their organization. So that's how we managed, that's how the citizen journalists managed to reach out. So because it was the only means, because there was no internet, because it was risky for everyone, we have to do it in a secretful manner so that the actual recipient would have the access to get it. And that's how it reached out.
So just as a follow-up, so it wasn't like a continuous media flow, but it was like a documentation of atrocities that they were kind of collected, and then like at certain times, then like all of these stories got out at kind of like when it was able to get out, and then like it stopped again, and these kind of things.
Yeah. Also there were stories that were that reached Addis Ababa or somewhere, but all of a sudden lost. There are times that the stories you sent might not be covered by the media. Some of them because of their horrific nature, some of them because they think that it's not worthy enough. You know the principle of journalism, that whether to cover it or not. So it was not a regular coverage, but it is on timely basis. Once you send, sometimes you get delayed to send them because you don't get the contacts you trust to smuggle those stories. Sometimes you wait, sometimes you are very much fortunate to send them on a regular basis. So whenever you send them, you have to be lucky enough to make sure that these videos have reached the actual person that belongs to send. So it's not a regular process, but it is occasionally. But most importantly, those who reached the final destination were quite useful to inform the international community. So it was not a regular process.
Thank you very much. So this is making me curious now to learn a little bit more about the practices of self-organization of the citizen journalists. So I'm just trying to understand their practices and their processes, and I think by now, and we've talked a little before, I get an idea of how stories, footage, whatever, video, would be transported out of the country. But I'm thinking, is there a level of self-organization? For example, do people try to anticipate the media logic? So they know, for example, I don't know, they know maybe that journalists need at least 2 or 3 sources documenting the same incident, for example. So they would maybe try to get at least 2 or 3 documents of the same incident through. So would they try to organize that they won't be addressed to different countries, whatever, media outlets, those kind of I don't know, structures and strategies that get developed in self-organized communities. There could be others. You think, yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, if I have correctly understood the question, is it related to verification of the sources of the message?
But not on the level of the journalists or the professional media outlets abroad in diaspora, more on the level of how citizen journalists develop their practices. Because I think you've talked a lot about the organization of the process to get the USB stick, for example, to the US, whatever. But how are those communities that you talked to and interviewed or maybe lived with, whatever, organizing themselves?
Yeah, the issue is, especially because of the information blackout, you don't regularly get the community. You have to visit them in person, ask them what has happened, take a notice about that. You may not write a story that's with good lead and like the principle of journalism, but you jot down stories which make newsworthiness and ask them the details. For instance, if you hear that 19 youths been killed in the village, you go there. If you can get pictures, I mean, photos of those people, that's fine. Otherwise, you have to go and ask them or get someone reliable from the village that can bring you the whole picture of the story. And then you send, this has happened, this number of people, this level of age has happened in this village. Then you send that. You send that to the person who is supposed to disseminate the story. If the case is not trusted, that the media abroad might reject the story. There are instances that the stories were rejected. There are several instances that's what we came to learn. But initially, they try their best to verify based on the skills they have. They may not make the right verification, but they try to consult as many sources as possible. For instance, sources from the military, sources from the community, and sources from the communities themselves, or sources who actually bring the story. So they try to cross-check. And these days, when you take the photo, sometimes it shows you the date and the place. Some phones have that access, especially if it is an iPhone. So that mechanisms were used to verify, used to analyze whether it is really story or something fabricated. But the means that they used to was just contact the community, ask them what did they observe, what happened to them, what did they hear, what really happened to their neighbors, and what they observe, what does it mean, how do they understand. These types of questions were being asked by individuals who consider themselves as citizen journalists. Then they jot down the story, send it to the media organization whom they think would be useful, and some of them rejected, but most of them accepted.
I was still wondering what kind of profession these people had who make this journalism. Were they journalists before, or were they people from the cities or from the region? That was what kind of persons worked in this kind of citizen journalism?
Okay, thank you very much. Journalists were hunted and put to jail, so there is no chance journalists will do this, because if they stay in the region, they will be the only chance they have is detention. So they were not there. These are ordinary citizens from social science background, from natural science background, from engineering, software engineers, where some of them were software engineers, for instance. So it is a trial and error method that they devised of just recording the story and sending it abroad. It's not by profession, it's not by training. They didn't have that exposure before. Look, as I have mentioned it earlier, the Ethiopian government, whether it is a former one or the current one, they don't encourage citizen journalism as a practice, because it is a means to disclose alternative voices. That's not a common practice in Ethiopia. Rather, they are bystanders, that people who came suddenly just to self-defend themselves and let the world know what really has happened to them, rather than professionals, rather than the ones who have the expertise and the knowledge, but simply a trial and sending mechanism so that the world would know. Otherwise, they didn't have the profession. And the journalists, by far, were not allowed to operate in the region unless they are the ones who are sent from the Abiy Ahmed government himself. The rest of them are not allowed to cover, allowed to report, allowed even to be there, because they were considered as they are siding with the TPLF, whom the government is fighting with. So they are not anymore journalism professionals, but they are ordinary people, ordinary in a sense from the journalist perspective, but they are educated ones, educated males, mostly at their early ages, young people, because we agreed with them not to disclose their details anyways. But they are ordinary people who are from diverse educational background, but most of them are BA master's holders and some of them PhD holders, of course. So they are well trained in terms of their respective background, but they don't have any training of journalism. So just as sake of contributing to the community, and they have came up with significant contributions. So they are not trained journalists, but simply educated individuals that collected and distributed.
So I think what you analyzed is how in the situation of war, the local grassroots journalists managed to reach out and create international public awareness via smuggling out the news to international news organizations. Who them seem to have picked it up and reported, and then the United Nations became aware, and there were reports by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and so on. So I was wondering what were the most important international news organizations reporting, and how frequently did they report on what happened? I mean, how often did videos by the local grassroots journalists make it onto CNN and so on? Yeah, because I can imagine then it's a huge international public seeing these reports. Was it on a day-to-day basis, or like once a month, or more rarely? And you also said that in the UN Security Council, China and Russia blocked further action by the United Nations, and more shared the Ethiopian government perspective that there's no war going on, no genocide, just a law enforcement operation. Now, in terms of international news, of course, these two countries also have their own international news media organizations that are state-controlled, like CGTN in China, and also Xinhua news agency, and Russia Today in Russia. And do we know how these Chinese and Russian news media reported on Tigray, or did they ignore it, or did they share the Ethiopian government perspective? And then I'm also wondering, when there were the international news report on CNN, Al Jazeera, and so on, how did the Ethiopian government react to it? I mean, it was it's a Nobel Peace Prize winner running the government, now facing this international news coverage about what is going on. How did the Ethiopian government react? Did they not react at all, or did they start a kind of counter-information campaign? Did they try to influence also international media coverage? Yeah. Could you say a bit more about these things?
Thank you. As I have mentioned it earlier, at the earlier stages of the war, no international media was allowed to come to Tigray. So most international media are based in Addis Ababa, in the capital city. So they have to rely on government sources, especially Al Jazeera at earlier stages was reportedly covering that it is law enforcement operation. And then CNN came up early to cover the same way. France 24 did the same. And some DW used to do the same, I remember, because we were curiously following what's really happening whenever we had electricity. Most of the time we didn't have electricity, so we don't know really what is going in some parts of the world. So at the earlier stages of the war, really Tigray didn't receive much coverage in any of the international media. But at a later stage, especially when the Ethiopian government controlled the region, they had access to CAM. CNN has produced a number of stories. I don't know how many of you will know Naima El-Bagr from CNN has got an award on producing very good documentary about the war in Tigray and the crimes being committed there. So she has a number of stories produced in relation to Tigray and how the Eritrean forces have been operating in the region. France 24 did a number of stories. The same has happened on Al Jazeera, especially the rape and the likes of what is really happening in Tigray. And News Channel 4 from UK also did the same thing. Several stories come out in BBC and a number of outlets. But they didn't appear in CGTN or RTE, something Russian-related news outlets. I don't think they were reported. what we heard is that at the end of the day, they were used to declare that the people of Tigray and the Ethiopian government should make peace deal. That was the coverage more given to the coverage. They didn't cover it much because they might be related to stick to their respective governments' views. I don't know, that could be the reason behind. But because the international media eventually got to come to know what is really happening, and their respective governments in the US, in Germany, in Belgium, in France, in UK, came to learn that something bad is happening in Tigray. So they got several stories being covered in the area, and then that's why the international community learned to come to consensus that we have to investigate what is really happening. That's how they mobilized resources for the International Human Rights Commission staff to undertake the investigation. So the China and Russia didn't give much coverage, but the rest of them eventually came to know that something is happening, and then they came to cover. But this was not easy for them. So, for instance, Naim El-Bagir from CNN was held hostage by Eritrean forces at some moment, I remember, and then they have to release her, and they have to give her warning not to cover any story. And I remember a journalist from The Economist was based in Addis Ababa, was denied access to stay in Addis Ababa. He has to leave within 72 hours. And I remember a New York Times reporter has to leave Ethiopia as well because of indicating that Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed has war preparations in advance with Eritrean regime, because he disclosed that he has denied access. The same has happened to Washington Post. So the counter response from the Ethiopian government was not easy, but they managed one way or the other to tell the world that some bad thing is happening to the people of Tigray. But that was in the second phase of the war when Abiy controlled the cities, not earlier. At the earlier stages, no one has really come to know what has happened. But the issue of Russia and China is, as I have told you, they didn't give much coverage. We know that CGTN is based in Addis Ababa, but that was not the focus. The same thing with Russian embassy. So we come to learn that each time the United Nations Security Council makes a meeting, that the final decision is to end up on veto powers. And these guys are some of them, and then they were the ones to side with Abiy government, and that has failed. But their media didn't cover either from the positive side or the negative sides of the war. Rather, they preferred to keep silent, and that's how it is entertained. But we have already written an article on how CNN and Al Jazeera reported, and it will be out in Journalism Journal, hopefully, and that's how they viewed and what framing they followed. So we have tried to assess the framing of Al Jazeera and the CNN about the Tigray war. So we sent an article, we're waiting for the response. Almost it is 11 months, so we're waiting to hear from them. So that's also an area we explored, how these media specifically looked at it, and they give much coverage, so we can say that they covered a lot.
You explained quite thoroughly how difficult the process was to get stuff out of the country. You also illustrated the impact that reporting had within the region, so like organizing people, motivating people to enter the struggle, or even the armed forces. What I would be interested in, did that journalism, that citizen journalism, have any impact in other states of Ethiopia? Because, I mean, there's a war going on within their own country against a region that in the last 20 years or so was just considered one, or even an important one, if I got that correctly, among many. So I imagine that reactions of other Ethiopians have been quite differing, right, regarding this. So could you say anything about sort of the impact on other Ethiopian regions of that citizen journalism?
Yeah, it's. I mean, initially it's called a war against the people of Tigray. So no one really cared what is happening there, and they always take what is coming from Tigray as fake news. So that because of their allegiance with their relation with the Ethiopian government, and they think that Abiy Ahmed is fulfilling the law enforcement operation. So they decided and they kept quiet about it. But eventually, they came to learn that as a people they committed serious crime, as a church they committed serious crime, as a mosque they committed serious crime. So now things are getting emerging, and the other worsening thing is the cost of living, the issue of security, joblessness, inflation, and the likes are now getting higher and higher. Now, these issues came to make people learn what is really the cost of the war, what the cost of the war has brought to Ethiopia. Because of that, they came to analyze on regular basis. So they are acting to send the stories of Ethiopia to other media outlets as well, using Twitter, using Facebook, because they have access at the moment, to reflect that this government should change. That's the common words now I'm getting to learn, that the people who sided with him now becoming against him because of the war, because of the consequences of the war in the overall economy, because the war costed not 1 million from the people of Tigray, but $1 billion in terms of costs, because Abiy Ahmed has to pay every Eritrean soldier a salary for 2 years that will be paid in US dollars. So now, as a poor country who depend on European Union or the United States to pay a salary for its citizens, can't afford that amount of money. So that impact directly goes to the people. That's why now they are coming to learn that what has been being given from the Tigray side is worthy enough to consider. So they are coming not to support us, but to realize the impact of the war on individual life. So another perspective of another wave of citizen journalism is happening, but because the environment is not as such conducive for freedom of speech and access to information for everyone, still the process is very much tight. But the Ethiopians are coming to learn that this process has taken everyone, has taken for bad, and had really terrible impact on the country. So they are coming to realize, and they are coming to oppose the once Nobel Prize winner.